Hi, welcome back to another episode of At Home with Cathy. Today we're going to shoot at the store. The reason we're doing that is we had this wonderful dresser donated, and it is simply too heavy to move back and forth from my house to the store, so we decided to shoot right in place. And you know what? That's a good thing, because one of the things that's most interesting about this paint is that you can literally paint in place. What we've done is we've put down a drop cloth, and I've lifted up the dresser and put it on little blocks of wood. That's going to help me, in my house, that would help me stop getting as much dog hair from the floor on the piece. But it just protects it a little bit, gives you a little bit of a cleaner edge too as you're painting. So this is a dresser, and you can have a look at the top of it and see that it is worn. It has had water on it. It's been well used, as you would expect a dresser of this age to be used. It has a mirror that goes along the back, which I do have at home, and I will be painting that separately. But we looked at it and we thought, maybe you don't want it as a dresser anymore. And because this is everything we're painting in this season is going towards Project Renew, which is a Chrysalis House fundraiser, maybe this piece is going to have a new life as a dining room piece. Maybe this is going to be a linen chest. Maybe this would be something that somebody would make into a sink vanity. So we're going to change it completely. We're going to paint it in Amsterdam green. We're going to do the inside of the drawers in bright yellow because they are very dark. And we're going to follow along as we've been doing through this whole series using the colorist and issue number 2. And I'm going to excuse the background noise, but we are painting while the store is open, and that's just part of what today's going to be about. We are going to paint in a style similar to this waxed bureau. Now here they've used Florence, I think was the color that she used. We're not going to use Florence, we're going to use Amsterdam green, just because I really think this dresser would look gorgeous in the green. What makes it a little bit different than a just straight paint and wax is we paint, we do a second coat of paint. We're going to let that dry, so we're not going to get it all finished today. We're going to clear wax it when we finish, and we're going to use dark wax to create some age around this dresser. This is aged. We can't make it look new, and I don't think we want to. That's not the beauty of the piece. We want to make it look comfortable, like it would fit into one of our homes now. So we're going to start by, I've already given it a really good wash, but the next thing is to take off all the hardware, and I cheated a little bit. I've learned that if you try and do this on video, sometimes things don't unscrew. But I'm just going to unscrew everything. Now, I always put the screws back into the knobs. You can find them. Whoops. Put them back in. I'm going to go along, I'm going to do this with all of the hardware. And then I'm going to put it all in a bag. And this already has the screws in it for the mirror that go along the back, so I'm going to put them all together. When I have everything collected, including these pieces. Now, these pieces, we're going to clean them up, and we're going to see if we can make them look nice and shiny again. If we can't, we're going to gild them. We're going to use the gold wax and give them new life. But these have a screw hole in the back and a nail hole. So when you're pulling them out, you want to make sure you get that nail as well. Yep. And what that does is just a tiny little nail. Probably when I put it back in, I'm going to put a little dab of glue on it. It stops the ring from swinging. It keeps it stable in place. So I'm putting everything into the bag. And I might as well take these drawers out. When I'm painting a dresser, I take the drawers out and I paint the fronts of them standing up. It's a lot easier. And I think you do a better job on the actual drawers and the door. I'll paint the insides of them separately. Just take this right out. So, at some point, before you're back again, I'll vacuum that out. So we're going to get started on our paint. I'm using a round brush, and as we've said times before, I've damped my brush so that the paint isn't absorbed by the bristles. It goes a little further, helps smooth it out, but also because there is so much wear and tear on this piece, it's important to use Annie's technique of going all over sort of in a crosshatch. It'll disguise what's missing. Down along the bottom, which you can't really see, but along the bottom there are actually pieces of the veneer that have chipped off. And using the paint in the all over pattern, crisscross, actually really helps to hide that. So let's get started. Beautiful, rich Amsterdam green. Need to get right down in here. This color is quite bright when you first put it on, and it dries to a richer, darker color. The other thing about painting a dresser is if I were to put it up on a table, it would actually be too tall for me to paint the top of it. I'm going to work in all the way along here. So I'm just going to work in and do across the front, work my way down, do the sides, work my way down, and the very last thing I'll do is the top. And to make sure that I don't get a rough edge, I'm just going to keep that smooth so that I don't have an edge that's built up with a bubble on it here, which will show up in my paint. So I'm just going to get a coat of paint on that, and we'll come back and look at it again in a minute. So we're just going to work on one of the small drawers. Now normally you'd paint with the grain, and the grain on this drawer happens to go this way. But I want the finish to go the same all across the dresser. So if I paint this way on the small drawers, it's going to look a little funny when it's all done if you looked closely. So I'm going to paint against the grain in this case. It's actually a little bit odd that the grain went that way, but I think it might have been a faux grain, so that could be why. So just a quick across the top, and this is why I do the insides afterwards. I'm going to do, it'll take 2 coats, and I don't have to be quite as careful if I'm going to paint inside afterwards. So get a nice finish on it, pick up any bumps of paint, and set it to dry. And here at the store today we have a beautiful sunny day, so it's actually going to dry really nicely in the window. I feel like one of those live mannequins. Modeling my apron. This is the reason this is fun to do this dresser. Look at all of the work in here, and you can see that if I run my finger across that, the varnish that's on it has made it all sort of look like leather. And this is going to be the fun part, the focal point of doing the dresser when we get to the waxing, but we do have to put that paint on first. So we're just going to go all the way down. Work the paint in. I do want to make sure I get it in. I love these round brushes for that. I want to make sure I get it into all of the finish. And not a lot of paint on my brush to do this because I don't want to have big drips or gobs of paint as it's finishing. Otherwise I'd have to go back and pick them up, and I don't want to do that. That's just waste time and paint. But look at the difference in that, just painting it. It is going to be so pretty. Just paint the top of this. And then we're going to leave all of the drawers and the dresser to dry and come back and do a second coat. This is always the part that seems to make the most dramatic changes when you get to the top. So I've done my sides and my front, and now I'm going to do the top. And when I do the top, on this piece, it actually was sectioned, veneered in 4. But I want a fairly smooth top coat. So I'm going to start on one side. I'm going to work in here. I want to keep what they call a wet edge. I don't want it to dry here before I come back with my brush, because I'll end up with too much of a brush stroke. And I'm going to pick up. How can you get dog hairs when there isn't even a dog hair? Zoe gets around. So we're just going to quickly, fairly wide, fast strokes here. And I want to bring my brush right over to the edge. I don't want to go this way with my brush. You can see what happens if I do. I pick up a gob of paint. I don't want that, because then I have to go back and do this, and it just takes more time. So I try to flip my brush right to the end and avoid having to go back very much, because anytime I have to go back, I'm going to drag my brush through the paint, and maybe if the paint has started to dry, I'm actually going to pick up paint and take it off from where I just painted it. Just using the edges of the brush, the very tip, the whole brush is not dipped in. The only reason you see paint down here is because I bend the brush into the paint. I don't need to fill in these holes, because that's where my mirror goes. In fact, I don't want to fill in these holes. I'm losing a few hairs here. And I'm going to come back and do a second coat, so I'm not worried about it being perfect. I'll start on this side. Work my paint in. I am trying to work the paint into where that veneer met. I want to fill that gap in, because otherwise I'll end up with a little brown spot that I don't want. A little brown line. I am getting a few little pieces. I think my brush is getting a little worn. Can't imagine why my brush would be getting worn. Finish that. Going right to the edge, same thing here. Don't want to pick up too much in a edge on my paint. Keep it nice and even. And making sure I fill in that gap. Nice wide strokes. Makes it go faster and it looks better. There we go. So we're going to let this all dry, and we'll come back and do a second coat. It will definitely need a second coat. This wood has a lot of red in it, and the red in the finish tends to come through almost every color you put on it, even a dark green. So we will come back and put a second coat on it in a little bit. So we have the first coat on most of our dresser here. And as you can see, it's going to require a second coat. But I want this to be good and dry. You can see the dark here. That's the wood grain coming through a little bit. I'm going to leave the fan on that a little bit longer, make sure it's good and dry, do a second coat. But the drawers, which have been sitting in the sun, have dried quite quickly. So we'll do a second coat on those right now. And then we'll talk about how we're going to finish this. So I've got a nice, want to get a nice finish here. And then when I have all of them painted, I'll do the insides. I can always touch up if I get it. I think I'm going to do the insides yellow. There's something about that. I thought it would make be a kind of a nice surprise when it opens. Have a nice bright yellow drawer. And with this, it's nice to have your split end round hair brush because you've got quite a few little crevices here to wiggle the paint in and out of. And we need the paint in there because when we go to do the contrast with the wax, we won't get it if we don't have the paint. We'll just have the darkness of the original veneer. Yeah. We'll let that dry again and finish the second coat on all of the rest of the dresser. But let's talk for a minute about how we're going to finish. What we decided to do, instead of trying to complete all of our projects in one show, which makes for quite a long time for shooting and quite a long time for drying as we just sit around waiting for paint to dry, we're going to collect all of our finishings and do them in 2 or 3 parts as separate shows. So soon you're going to see the first 4 finishes of the first 4 projects, and then in a couple weeks you'll see the next 4 and so on. But what we're going to do here is finish with dark and clear wax. So what we're going to do is do a wet coat or a first coat of clear wax over all of our finish. Before that has begun to dry, we'll wipe off the excess, but we're not going to buff it. And before that's begun to set, we're going to take our dark wax and a separate brush, and we're going to work it into, you can see her on the drawers, there's a little bit of detail. We're going to work it in there so that we're working the dark towards the outside, and we'll have a clearer look of our green in the inside, but it'll help kind of age the piece, but it'll do it the way it would have done naturally or normally. And that'll be quite effective on the drawer. It'll be quite effective here where we have a lot of detail in the top of the dresser and on the feet, because you can see on the feet they have the fluted, I don't know if you can see that detail, they have the fluted detail here. So if we can get a little bit of shadow in there with dark wax, it'll stand out a little bit more. So a second coat of paint, and the next time you see this piece, we'll be ready to work on the finish of it. It has to be good and dry, and it's a large piece, so it's going to take some time. So look for that in an upcoming episode. And thank you very much for joining me again today while we worked at the store. It worked out very well. Nobody got any paint on it. There are 3 ways you can participate in our Renew project. 1, donate a piece for me to paint. Send me a picture though, I can't paint everything. And we're still looking for 4 or 5 pieces that we need to paint, and we will paint and donate them to the auction or to Chrysalis House. 2, you paint along with me. Come in and get some paint, we'll consult on colors, we'll give you a discount on your purchase. You paint along with me and donate your piece to the auction in May, and we'll make sure those funds go directly to Chrysalis House. Or 3, what if you don't want to paint or donate? You could donate cash. Project Renew is a building fundraiser for Chrysalis House. You can contact them directly to make arrangements on how to donate. Welcome to the project.